And over the next month, as I said, we're hosting 3 webinars, of which this is the first, to create the space for the sector to grapple with these unanswered questions around artificial intelligence. After Easter, we'll also be releasing some more guidance to support providers to continue on this journey of sort of adaptation and transformation in the face of AI. I should say that my name is Eve Alcock. I am Head of Public Affairs at QAA. And when we dreamt up the title to this webinar, to ban or not to ban, that felt like a really relevant question that everybody was asking. And people are still asking it, but a matter of weeks later, we know now shortly that we will see generative AI integrated into software like Microsoft Word and Google Docs. So in a sense, the title sort of already seems out of date, and it just shows how fast this is moving. So I can't promise that this event will answer all of the questions that you might have on AI and what it means for the higher education sector, but I've no doubt it will deepen the thinking and discussion on the issue for you. And if you walk away with at least one new angle or implication that you hadn't thought of before, then that will be success, certainly in my eyes, and I hope you will get that out of it today. So to help us grapple with this, we are thrilled to be joined by 5 fantastic speakers. We've got Michael Webb, who is the Director of Technology and Analytics at Jisc and co-leads Jisc's National Centre for Artificial Intelligence. We've got Dr. Phil Anthony, who is Head of Technology Enhanced Learning at the University of Kent. Stella Maris, who is the Rector's Assessor at St Andrews University and a member of QAA's Student Strategic Advisory Committee. Dr. Irene Glendinning, who is the Academic Integrity Lead for Coventry University Group, and Dr. Bronwyn Eager, who is a Senior Lecturer at the University of Tasmania, who has very kindly joined us late in the evening over in Australia. So our speakers are going to speak for about 8 minutes in turn each, giving their response to the question to ban or not to ban. Do feel free to put questions in the chat as we go, and we'll try and squeeze in as many as we can in a Q&A before we finish, though it might be a bit of a squeeze, so forgive us in advance if we're rushing that bit. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Twitter as well, and if you want to use the hashtag QAA ChatGPT to follow along and connect with other people on the event, then please do that. And a heads up that we are also recording this for future use. So I don't want to take up any more time. I'm delighted to hand over to our first speaker, Michael from Jisc. Take it away, Michael.
Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully that's worked. So I'm going to look at 2 angles. Is it possible to detect ChatGPT, and is it possible to ban, which I think we've already agreed it's not, but we'll delve into that a little bit more. So let's start with detecting. So is it possible to detect AI? The answer to that is sort of, which might not be terribly helpful, but it's worth delving into this a little bit more. So no system today can conclusively prove that text was written by AI. And I think that's quite a useful thing to understand as a starting point. All that the systems can do is give some kind of probability that it might have been written by AI. I'm just going to go into the 3 main approaches that we see. It's useful perhaps to understand that, and then we can see why these are unreliable. So there are 3 main techniques that generally people look at on this. One is looking at writing style, the next is machine learning classifiers, and the last is watermarking. So I'll start with writing styles, and this one gets proposed either as something that humans can do or something that machines can do. So we've probably observed that ChatGPT and the like have a default voice that's very particular. It's kind of bland, it's kind of authoritative. Our CEO described it as mansplaining as a service that I quite liked. So it's got a very particular voice. And some people say, I can spot that a mile off. 2 problems with that. First of all, actually in practice, research has shown that most people can't. I know I can't. I've been fooled by it many times when people have sent an article and then it says down the bottom, but also we can change the voice. You all know you can get it to write like a pirate or something. No essay is going to be written like that, but it can change. Software like GPT-0 tried to measure this more scientifically, looked at something called perplexity, which is the randomness of the text, and measured that. Very easy to defeat, lots of false positives. The next mechanism is a more traditional, if you're familiar with this sort of thing, machine learning type approach. So this is where you take a whole bunch of essays that a human has written, or a whole bunch of text that a human's written. You take a whole bunch of text that's written by AI or written by ChatGPT. You then train a model so that it can then, when it sees new text, either work out whether the whole text or just portions of the text were likely to be written by AI. OpenAI had a crack at doing this and released a system, and it was catastrophically success rate of about 27% accuracy in terms of spotting loads of false positives. If you tried it, it was almost like a random number generator. So either this is a really, really hard problem, or it wasn't in OpenAI's interest to actually get it to work very well. We've probably all seen the figures from Turnitin that are much higher in test scenarios. So they've talked about a 97% accuracy. It's worth thinking about that, and a 1% false positive rate in controlled experiments. So we've not been able to test Turnitin 1, but any other one that we've come across, again, very easy to defeat just by changing the text so it no longer feels like it was written by AI. The last is watermarking. Now, I'm mentioning this because you may have heard it mentioned as the solution. No products today actually have watermarking, but there is some research in this space, and they roughly propose that what you could do is have essentially a secret way of splitting the words that AI generates into two groups. We call it a green group and a red group. And what it will do is it will only select, or almost always select, words from the green group. We won't know because we don't know how it's split, and there are enough words in the language that it will still read normally. But you can see on the image on the right, you can visually see unwatermarked text against watermarked text. Yeah, so you can even see as a human, it looks different. There are going to be problems with this. One, it looks like paraphrasing might just defeat it. There's an argument to say you have to paraphrase so much that that would change the meaning. Second is that we're seeing a trickle down. So it relies on the producer of the technology to release a model. So we're relying on the person creating it to release tools to do it. In the meantime, these models are trickling down so that anyone can run them. You can run a basic ChatGPT actually on a small laptop or phone using technology from a few months ago. So we'll see a whole market of non-watermarked text arrived. And so each of these techniques can be defeated, and they also give false positives. Okay, so they will say text is written by AI when it's not. And this can happen for a number of reasons. Some people actually just write like ChatGPT. You've all met them, haven't you? So they will get flagged, but it's also, there are some nuances around the edge, perhaps English as a second language, some sort of text like lists, bullet points, things like that, just happen to look more like it was written by ChatGPT. So we'll see detectors on the market. We know it's coming in Turnitin. They will provide a bit of information, but it's not conclusive. Can we ban it? So we've already seen the answer is no. We never could. Okay. AI was already in Word. We maybe didn't think about it, but grammar checkers, spell checkers, the generative summarizer, all sorts of other things in Word already used AI. Next word prediction that's been there for ages was AI. Couldn't have banned it. We've probably all seen the Microsoft Copilot announcements coming in. It's going to be built throughout the whole thing. So it's going to be the way we write. If we start trying to investigate everything that something like an AI detector throws up as academic mispractice, we are going to get into a completely unfeasible situation. That is my whistle stop 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really clear and useful useful framing to sort of set us off. I am going to hand straight over to our next speaker in the interest of time, Dr. Phil Anthony from the University of Kent. So Phil, if you want to build on what Michael's already told us.
Thank you. I'll just quickly share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Okay, so hi everyone, thank you. My name is Phil Anthony. I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about embracing ChatGPT. So, hang on a second. As you can tell from my first slide, I'm going to argue that I'm going to address the concern. Oh, sorry, hang on. As you can tell from my next slide, over the next 8 minutes, I'm going to argue that as a sector, we should be embracing ChatGPT, basically. And to back this up, I'm going to start by addressing the concerns raised over the use of ChatGPT in education, and hopefully allay some of the fears around this before moving on to the benefits. So that's what I'm going to argue. But what I really wanted to say today is that these ideas are not just my own. I've formed them with the help of input from colleagues from across the sector. So where do I get my information from? Well, you might recognise Michael here. As some of you may know, I run the Digitally Enhanced Education webinar series, and we've recently hosted 2 webinars focusing on ChatGPT. And both of these webinars attracted around 1,400 attendees each. And I'm excited to share some of the insights that we gained from that webinar with you today. During the webinar, we also opened a Padlet, which you can again see on the slides here. So people could share resources, ideas, and voice their concerns. And the Padlet's been used really well with around 200 contributions. So I'll try and drop the link into the chat so you can all have a look if you'd like to. So before we can talk about embracing ChatGPT, I really think we need to acknowledge that lots of people have got concerns about it, about ChatGPT or other large language modules, specifically in education. Now, here's a list of the main concerns. There are more, but we've only got 8 minutes. That I've found via the webinars and the Padlet board. Now, we could fill the entire webinar today talking about each of these quite easily, but we've only got 8 minutes. So I'm going to try and do my best to summarize them now. So whenever ChatGPT is discussed, we've already kind of brought it up. One of the first things that comes up in conversations is that students will use it to cheat. However, I would argue that if students were allowed to use this technology to help their learning, with the caveat that they're open and transparent with how they use it, they're going to be less likely to use it to cheat. After all, why would they need to? They don't need to hide it. Again, as we've already kind of discussed, Microsoft kind of have forced our hand on this one now, announcing recently that they're bringing this into all of the tools that we now provide our students. So PowerPoint, Excel, Microsoft Teams, all of this stuff, which is called Copilot. So I believe the way forward has to involve an evaluation of this, an evaluation of how we assess our students. So, for example, looking at where written assignments really are needed, and if allowing students to use this technology just isn't possible, and there will be cases where that is the case, then we need to have a look at the assessment type and maybe go for something that's a little harder for ChatGPT to do. And again, there's lots of information around this. So it could be reports on independent research activities, reflective responses that bring in personal insights, reflective portfolio style assessments that are built up over time. These are all great assignment methods that students love doing. It's really kind of, the authentic assessment style, it's the things they want to get stuck into. So using these are actually harder to do with this technology anyway. So maybe we need to have a rethink. Next up, it's quite a big one. So ChatGPT won't help students become independent and critical thinkers who can solve problems on their own. I recently saw a quote that I thought was brilliant, and that was that teaching critical thinking and problem solving isn't enough if we ignore the real world in which students will actually use those tools. I think that's so important. And as I pointed out in my last slide, AI is being placed into all of these tools that we use in the workplace. So surely we should be helping our students to learn how to use these tools in a critical way. So how do we do this? Well, I believe it has to start with having discussions with our students about these tools and helping them understand what it can do, but also what it's not so good at. Now, I understand that this is where a whole load of stress comes in, as the majority of us, with the exception of Michael here, are not experts in AI. So having the thought of having these conversations with students could be really daunting, especially if you feel that they're more clued up in it than we are. Now, here is where institutional level guidance is really needed to help provide a framework for those discussions. And you'll see on the screen here a screenshot of some student level guidance that I've created for students at Kent. But we also have staff-facing guidance as well to help guide staff, or at least give them something to go on. I think that's so important. So next up, we have bias and hallucinations grouped together. Now, regarding bias, Michael's done a great talk on this. It's important to note that ChatGPT's responses are, I'm going to trip over on that one, are generated based on the data it's trained on, which can lead to biased responses. Now, this link means that the large language model may reinforce or amplify stereotypes or provide skewed perspectives on certain topics. So I think it's really crucial, therefore, to remind students about this potential bias when using ChatGPT, specifically in an education setting. Now, on to my next point. If you've had a play with ChatGPT, I'd encourage you to, if you haven't, you've probably experienced the hallucinations and found that sometimes it generates responses that are not factually accurate or relevant in any way. Now, it's important to note that this is a limitation of the tool that we need to make students aware of. Okay, it's still a really cool tool. And again, linking to my previous slide, by doing this, you can emphasize the importance of critical thinking and the decision-making, and most importantly, responsible use of this technology. And again, that's where the conversations come in. So this is a concern that I've heard a lot at the webinars, in the Padlet, and a lot via social media and in conversations. Now, while ChatGPT is a really cool tool, and some of the other tools as well, it's not going to replace us. Why? Well, these tools, they lack emotional intelligence, don't they? If we look at research from social psychology, it's consistently shown that humans have a basic need for social connection and interaction. I think we can all recognize that. It's referred to as belongingness, and it's linked to lots of positive outcomes, such as increased motivation, engagement, and academic achievement. Studies have also shown that students who have positive relationships with their teachers are going to be more likely to be motivated and to learn and perform better. I think we can all kind of realize that.
Hello, friend.
So to put simply, AI will not, should not, and indeed cannot replace the teacher because of what is unique to the teacher, and that's our humanity, isn't it? So I'm nearly done, I promise. Regarding the benefits of these large language modules, I've listed a few here. There are loads more, but I'm starting to run out of time. So I think if we just go by the sheer number of people now signing up to use these tools, I think we can see that there are clear benefits there. But later on, I'd encourage you to have a look at this video here that was at the last webinar. This is Zed Mahmood. He's the Kent Union president. And in this talk, he really highlights just how much ChatGPT would have helped him during his time at university. It's a really powerful message, and I'd encourage you to have a look at it. So, in conclusion, in education, we aim to provide our students with the skills that they're going to require when entering the workplace. So why would we limit the use of ChatGPT? One of the most exciting advancements in technology we've seen in years. I think it's so cool, and I think most of us here today do. So surely it's got to be our jobs to help students to learn how to use these tools. So that's me done.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Phil. And speaking of the student perspective, actually, our next speaker, we have the brilliant Stella Maris, who is the Rector's Assessor at St Andrews University and is on QAA's Student Strategic Advisory Committee. So Stella, if I can hand over to you, that would be fantastic.
So, can you guys see my screen?
We can see something in front. There you go. Perfect. Yes.
Right. So you can see the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And nothing else.
Good. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Like was said, my name is Stella Maris, and I'm the Rector's Assessor at University of St Andrews. I will be covering how we foster better relationships of trust and partnership with students in the process of implementing ChatGPT, which, as has already been established, is probably unbannable. I'd also like to note that I think a lot of the points that have already been raised, I've noted, I've raised as well. Hopefully there isn't too much repetition. So as we continue to navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of technology in education, it's important that we consider how we can effectively incorporate those new tools and platforms into our learning spaces. This can help us better engage with and support our student population. One technology that has been gaining traction in recent years is our chatbots and conversational AI, with ChatGPT being a particularly notable example and the one that we're focusing on today. So I'm going to start off by discussing how we navigate the technological landscape in education. So despite growing up in a time of rapid technological development, I'm still astounded by the fact that we now have access to technologies like ChatGPT, which just a few years ago might have been thought of as something only future generations would benefit from decades or even centuries from now. Though I consider myself among the uninitiated in the rapidly developing technological landscape, I can't help but feel both excited and nervous about how often I find myself reevaluating my own perceptions of our species' capacity for ingenuity and inventiveness. It's both thrilling and daunting to witness the limits of what we once thought possible being pushed further and further every day. As Albert Camus once stated, our contemporary science has progressed to such an extent that it's useless to be unscientific. With every new height we reach, our species undermines and ridicules the entire concept of self-imposed limitations, and I'm seriously considering abandoning the practice altogether. I genuinely believe that the biggest mistake the higher education sector can make is to underestimate progress in the technological sphere. Our institutions are supposed to provide pedagogy that propels us to the forefront of innovation and progress. As John Wheeler once famously stated, our challenge is to keep alive the sense of the possible, to keep alive the sense of the mystery that has always been there. The current iteration of ChatGPT represents the beginning stages of what's likely to continue to be developed into an even more powerful tool that could revolutionize the way we teach and learn, with future updates bearing little resemblance to our current pedagogical practices. To let fear be the enemy of progress is to consign higher education to a cycle of consuming our own potential in the pursuit of protecting ourselves from the possibility of diminishing relevance. So how do we embrace ChatGPT in higher education? Well, to get the most out of ChatGPT, we have to see it not only as a tool for educators, but also as a tool that can be co-designed and co-implemented with our student community. By working in collaboration with students, increasing their confidence in our good intentions, we can more efficiently adapt the tool to meet their needs and provide them with personalized support for success. After all, students will be the ones using these tools on a daily basis and will be best placed to know what would be most beneficial for them as learners. This collaborative approach also gives us the chance to gain insight into how students may intuitively respond to the tool, such as what kind of questions they're likely to ask, what prompts they consider to be academic dishonesty, and what kind of engagement with the tool gives greater accessibility to information, while still stimulating and challenging them intellectually. We need to rethink what we define as academic dishonesty in light of these technological advancements, especially as they become more powerful and prevalent. As these tools evolve, they may circumvent and have been explained. It's been explained how they circumvent current methods of detecting academic misconduct. And it's crucial that we have an open dialogue with students to better understand their perspectives on the ethical use of these tools. So how do we involve students in co-design and implementation? So partnering with students in the development and implementation process of ChatGPT can increase their engagement with the technology and the sector as a whole. By placing students at the center of their learning, we can create a more personalized and focused approach to education, which benefits their academic success and future career prospects. We also must recognize that the use of artificial intelligence does not reflect a student's intelligence or capability. Rather, AI models like ChatGPT can be valuable tools for increasing accessibility to education, making it easier for students to engage with information and learn about the world around them. This is especially beneficial for students with neurodiverse profiles who may struggle with traditional methods of learning. And so by redefining our approach to academic integrity in the context of these new technologies and partnering with students in their development and implementation, we can create a more inclusive and empowering educational experience for all learners. Incorporating chatbots and conversational AI into our education system doesn't have to be seen as a threat to traditional teaching. Instead, it's an opportunity to enhance and supplement existing practices in order to better meet the needs of students from all backgrounds and learning profiles. With the use of these tools, we can create a more personalized and engaging learning experience, one that can help break down the barriers that have traditionally made education inaccessible to many individuals. Sorry, I missed out a section on this, but this section is on enhancing accessibility with AI modules and not addressing ethical concerns just yet. By reducing the workload of educators in updating course content, ChatGPT can allow for greater attention to be paid to incorporating diverse perspectives and ideas thereby contributing to a more inclusive and equitable education system that values the experiences and perspectives of all students. In addition, the 24/7 availability of ChatGPT can provide support for students who may face additional barriers to accessing those educational resources. So students who have work or family responsibilities or disabilities. Chatbots can also help bridge the digital divide by providing access to educational resources for students who may not have access to traditional resources or support systems. So students in underfunded schools or rural areas, or international students who may face language barriers or cultural differences. And the integration of those technologies in education can, as I said earlier, promote equity and social justice by reducing barriers to access and providing support to students who may face additional challenges. So access to quality education should not be limited to those with the means to pay for it. Sorry, I don't know why it's drawing on the screen. I'm going to ignore that. And nor should it be reserved exclusively for those who excel within a particular framework of learning. By embracing technological advancements like ChatGPT, we have an opportunity to reimagine education as a more inclusive and accessible space for all learners. And that's not to say that traditional pedagogy should be abandoned entirely, but rather that it should be adapted and complemented with these new tools and methods. I'd like to acknowledge that advocating for embracing chatbots and conversational AI in higher education is not to ignore the reality that technology can be a double-edged sword. While other tools can offer numerous benefits, including increased efficiency and personalized learning experiences, they can also present challenges and potential ethical concerns that warrant examination and mitigation. So how do we address ethical concerns? So things like privacy, security, and reliability. So on privacy and security concerns, institutions can implement strict policies and protocols that prioritize data protection, while also ensuring transparency in how student data is collected, stored, and used. Additionally, they can provide students with information on their rights, including their ability to control the types of data that are collected and how that data is used, and also provide them with the ability to opt out of certain data collection practices. To address concerns about the reliability and accuracy of ChatGPT, they can provide students with clear information on how the AI-powered system works and the research and development process that has gone into creating it. So that can include details on the types of data that are used to train the system, the methods used to validate its accuracy, and the ongoing efforts to improve its performance. Some, as was raised earlier, may worry about ChatGPT replacing human instructors, or reduce the quality of their education. But institutions can communicate that the AI-based platform is intended to complement rather than replace human instructors, and that the primary role of ChatGPT is to provide additional support to students, not to replace the important interactions and insights that human instructors can provide. So institutions can also emphasize the ways that ChatGPT can provide personalized responses to student queries, even outside of typical office hours. Can I do a time check really quickly?
30 seconds, is that all right?
Might need a bit more than 30 seconds, but I will break
Break
through the rest, sorry. Okay, so I'll move on to the section on redefining academic dishonesty. So a lot of the public discourse on ChatGPT has centered on anxieties about its potential to facilitate cheating in an academic setting. This framing of the issue demonstrates a fundamental mistrust of students that I think is counterintuitive to establishing that foundation of trust and partnership. Instead, we need to consider how we can work with students to promote academic integrity while also leveraging the benefits of ChatGPT for learning. Institutions can implement robust measures for detecting academic misconduct. So as mentioned earlier, plagiarism detection software or reviewing assessments for inconsistencies and irregularity, but we need to recognize that no system is foolproof. Another way to combat concerns about academic misconduct is by providing clear guidance on how ChatGPT can and should be used. So that can involve creating a set of best practices for integrating the technology into learning and assessment processes, and communicating these guidelines effectively to students might also be beneficial to involve students in the development of those guidelines. I don't really have a lot of time to run through the rest of it, but I want to stress at the end of this that I do think that the benefits of ChatGPT are significant, and by embracing technological advancements like ChatGPT, institutions can create a more inclusive and accessible educational environment that prioritizes learning as a societal good. Sorry, that was quite fast. But...
Fantastic. No, thank you so much, Stella. A really compelling and persuasive case for why this has to be done in partnership with students, and some really brilliant ideas in there. So thank you for that. Up next, our penultimate speaker is Dr. Irene Glendinning, who is Academic Integrity Lead for Coventry University Group. So Irene, to ban or not to ban?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to come along this morning. In my 8 minutes, I'm going to try and share with you something about what I've been working on with my colleagues for the last 12 months. Can you see my screen? Just to check, first of all. I hope so. Okay, so without further ado, what I'm going to do is to focus in on the academic integrity side of the discussions. But before I do that, I want to try and broaden the discussion. This is not just about one tool. It's not just about ChatGPT. There are many different types of tools that use artificial intelligence, and they've been with us for a very long time. They're still with us. They're going to be with us forever. We know that. So what I have on this slide are roughly divided into 4 types of different kinds of tools that we're talking about. So first of all, we have type 1 is tools that translate or transfer between media, the different kinds of text. So we're looking at text to begin with. So speech to text tools, text to speech tools, predictive text, also translation tools. And my colleagues and I have long been concerned about student misuse of translation tools, using translation where they should be writing in English. So that's the first type. So we need to think about what we should permit and what we shouldn't permit in terms of use of those types of tools. There's no point in banning these tools. They're with us, they've been with us a very long time. The second type are things like spell checkers, paraphrasers, grammar checkers. Again, they've been with us forever, and they're getting better and better. Students can misuse these tools though, so we need to be very clear with students what they're allowed to do and what they should not be doing, and where that red line lies. Type 3 is what we've been talking about so far in this morning's session. Essay box text generators, and we have to remember it's not just about ChatGPT. There are lots of these tools, Quillbot, Perplexity, lots of different ones, and they're getting better and better. They're still in their infancy, but they're already very, very good. Type 4 that we haven't talked about is all these other kinds of generators. They can generate programming code, they can generate graphical objects, artworks, music, they can solve maths problems. So it's not just confined to text generation. So I think that's what I'd like to start with, by just broadening the discussion into those different types of tools. And all of these tools, well, most of these tools, there is the potential to misuse the tools as well as to use them in a very positive way. And we really need to think very carefully with our students and discuss it with our students, what is appropriate use and what is inappropriate use of these tools. So what we did about a year ago, a group of colleagues and I started to think, and it was really paraphrasing tools that we started to think about. So we decided we really needed to do some investigation to find out more about the different types of tools. And then that led into a consultation with the wider university community. And now we're in the process of generating the guidance of staff and students, and also making necessary changes to regulation. But even by September, I realized that there was a need to do something more than just wait until we got all the guidance together. So I put in place what I would like to term as kind of emergency additions to our regulations. So these are 2 definitions of academic misconduct that I put in place in September 22, using technological aids and artificial intelligence, including various types of tools, without specific authorization. And this was, perhaps a slight knee-jerk reaction, but that seemed to be a really appropriate thing to do. And I stand by it. I think this is actually quite a measured way of actually talking to students and talking to staff about what it is we need to do to control the use in a certain way. And the second one is just specifically looking at translation tools, where an assignment is expected to be written or required to be written in English. If a student uses translation software or gets assistance from a third party to write it in their native language and then convert it into English, that could well be considered to be academic misconduct. So that was my response from September. And because I only get a chance once a year to change the regulations, I had to do it in September. And I may well have a kind of slightly more nuanced view of those for the next edition of our regulations in September. So we've been running focus groups now since January, and this is just a very, very brief list of things that we're finding. We haven't done the full analysis yet. But first of all, clearly, as everyone's been saying, banning is not possible. We must learn to live with these tools. In particular, we need to provide guidance on what we consider to be ethical use of the artificial intelligence tools, where the red lines are, where it becomes misconduct. But also we need to embrace them, because students will be using these in the workplace, as has already been said by other colleagues on the panel. We found that awareness among staff is mixed. A lot of the people that are coming forward and asking to be involved in the focus groups generally tend to be very clued up on what's going on, but a lot of staff are really quite worried and don't know a lot about it. So very mixed. We discovered that one part of the group had already started to do some research into the tools, and they were particularly looking at the detection of artificial intelligence use. And they produced a really useful report. So now we're working together with that group of educational technologists. There are different viewpoints in allowing the use and not. And inevitably, some staff came back and said we need to move back to exams and those kind of points of view. But we had a very useful discussion on that, about the types of assessment that we should be working towards. Unfortunately, we're already working on a curriculum transformation and assessment transformation project in the university, which is actually addressing a lot of the points that we need to address. What's come up a lot of times is we need to think very much about students with special learning needs and also with staff. So banning these tools would actually disadvantage all of those people. So we need to be helping students to get access to these tools, and staff as well, who would benefit from them. Clearly assessment design, but it's also very similar to what we're required to do for contract cheating. And there's a lot of overlap between what we've been doing to address contract cheating and the artificial intelligence tools. It came up that we really need to urgently communicate with staff and students, and that clearly we've been doing, and we need to do that more, continue to do that as we go through. In terms of the guidelines, I'm going to show you some initial guidelines that I've come up with, but we, as already been said, we'll perhaps have some scenarios and some examples on types of use, but we don't want to ban them, and we don't want to kind of restrict the appropriate use of these. And of course, there's also looking at the possibilities for detection. Okay, so staff guidance on the use of them. Students should be looking at what types of tools they may use and for what purpose, what they may not use and why not, and explain to students how they should acknowledge and what content, how they can demonstrate what content is their own content. And you know, it's possible to produce a kind of template to be used. In terms of students, the opposite. If a student wishes to use tools, they should gain permission from the module leader or supervisor. Specific use into deep water in terms of academic misconduct. So detection we've talked about a little bit, and detection, as it was said by the first speaker, is not there are lots of so-called detectors out there, but none of them work particularly well. That may change with time. In terms of a checklist, I think most of these points have been covered. We are picking cases up already. It's very difficult to prove them, but there are some. It's very similar to the checklist that we use for contract cheating, surprisingly. But as already been said, this is not foolproof. It's not 100%, but it does give some clues. And there I'm going to stop. So I'm sorry, I've slightly overrun, but hopefully that was useful, and compliments on.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you so much, Irene, and really useful to hear those reflections sort of in context of what's actually happening in your institution as well. So that's really useful to kind of bring it into kind of context for us. So last but by no means least, joining us from the other side of the world, we have the fabulous Dr. Bronwyn Eager from the University of Tasmania. So Bron, take us home.
Thank you for having me. And Irene, I loved what you were just saying, and I'm so excited that the conversation, we solved the question of whether it should be banned in the first 5 minutes of the presentations tonight, and we can kind of move forward, which is a delight to me because I'm obsessed with using these tools. And like Irene was saying, it's not just a ChatGPT question, it's so much bigger than that. Like, I'm using it for writing, for images, for generating podcasts, videos, websites. It's just embedded across so many different use cases, and it's getting more sophisticated. And it's I think 3,000 tools was the article that I saw the other day of how many were out there that you could possibly use. But I've only got 8 minutes, so there's 3 things tonight for me, this morning for you guys, for what I would like to reflect on. And they are water, a tweet that I saw, and also a timeline. And the first one is the famous commencement speech that was given by the author David Foster Wallace. And if you're not familiar with it, it's essentially that it starts off by saying there were 2 young fish swimming along in the water, and they passed an older fish. And as they went past the older fish said to them, "Good morning, boys, how's the water?" And the 2 fish kept on swimming, and then they turned to each other and said, "What the hell is water?" And I think we've kind of got to a point where we've been going through our journey and we haven't actually really noticed that AI has been everywhere and all around us for a very long time. And we just haven't really been paying attention to it, myself included. There definitely has been some people. But I think the majority of us were going through the world without realizing that AI was already embedded across most of our devices. And until November last year, AI was kind of like water. And the other thing that I reflected on this week was a tweet that someone posted in response to this session, actually, which was saying, "Why are we still talking about this? Like, why haven't we moved on already from the should we ban and should we not ban conversation?" And I think it's really easy to lose perspective when you're in this conversation all the time about the timeline of adoption of the technology. So ChatGPT is kind of the mass market consumer version of AI that's caused all this disruption because it is so easy to use. And it feels like it's been years since that technology first dropped in November, given the journey that we've all been on. That's actually only been a few months, really. And it's only been a few months in a higher education global conversation about what's happening. A huge percentage of students and educators and people in the higher education sector haven't logged on to ChatGPT or haven't consciously used an AI tool in their work process. And I think we need to remember that there is an adoption curve. And if you're in this session, you're probably quite far ahead along in it. So I think we kind of have a responsibility to keep having these conversations, to bring people along with us to go through the trajectory or through the journey that many of us have taken ourselves. And the last thing in the last few minutes that I've got is about journeys as well. And it's the journey of AI and digital literacies. And I was reflecting on, even just in my immediate family, like my father, he was a typewriter native because that was the technology that he was using. So he was native to typewriters. He adopted computers, got very excited about electronic typewriters, and then that became normalized for him. And then in my generation, I wasn't quite native to computers, but I was native to the electrical typewriter or the digital typewriter and to graphical calculators. And I saw some comments in the chat before, oh my gosh, the stir that the graphical calculator caused when I was a student is almost comical now. But I think with my father's generation and my generation, we had a really slow adoption of these technologies in our lifetimes, which we're not necessarily getting with the current speed at which things are moving. And then I look at my students who are digital natives, or they're called digital natives, my younger students at least, and they don't know a world without a smartphone in it. They can't imagine going through life without just that instant communication. But yet many of them don't know about basic filing systems in computers or saving a file to a drive. They just save it all in one spot and then search for what they need. And then I look at my niece and my nephew who are growing up in a generation where they think that they can pinch images on magazines and they will enlarge. And I think they will grow up as AI natives. But just like the students who don't understand the basic filing structures of computers, I think it's really important that we teach the younger generations and the older generations the underlying kind of how this technology works, and coming back to the issues of bias and equity and stuff that are actually built into these technologies. And just like the files, and I think AI it's almost, if we're in danger of eventually treating it like the two fish that are swimming with the water and not actually consciously engaging with it. And I think it's essential that we engage with it, because these skills are going to be essential workplace skills. They're just going to be baseline skills, like knowing how to send an email or using like basic Microsoft Word programs. I think that's where the future should be. So to the question of should we ban or not ban, I think it is overwhelmingly been answered by the panel. And my approach would be, I don't think we should even be thinking about banning or not banning. We should be thinking about educating so that people have a choice and they can consciously engage with these technologies and make deliberate decisions about whether they want to in the first place, and if they do want to, how they actually engage with them, and that we don't just slip into a world where AI is just ubiquitous and slip into David Foster Wallace's water world. And that's me. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bron, and a really sort of nice, I guess, reflective set of remarks to kind of finish us off, remind us that AI has always been sort of creeping into our everyday, and though this can seem alarming, it will just become part of us, and it's, you know, the panel, as you said, are unanimous on that. So there we have it, 5 perspectives on to ban or not to ban, all pretty unanimous in their conclusions, which is AI is here to stay. The question is how we use it as a force for good, which coincidentally is the title of our next webinar, which is next Friday. But right now we've got, I would say, maybe 5-6 minutes to cover off a few questions from the audience. So my colleague Helena has been keeping a beady eye on the chat, which, looking at the sort of volume of messages in there, is quite the task. So Helena, what questions do we have?
Yeah, it's been a very, very engaged chat, which has been really interesting to read, and a lot of support for the idea of embracing AI. I am going to just do a round of 3, and if we've got time, maybe do some more afterwards. So sorry if we don't get to your question. But it's a question from Stephen on, do you see the dangers of ChatGPT damaging the learning experience? So outside of assessment validity, what about the process of reading and researching and synthesizing, writing an essay? Do you think AI damages that? We've had a question from Shaylee about whether colleagues have come across any students who are really skeptical about using it and how you've approached those conversations if there's students that don't want to kind of engage with it. And finally, a question from George that basically says, if we're going to ask students to declare this, is that not counterintuitive if this is about to become as kind of ubiquitous as spell checker is to a student writing an assessment?
Amazing. So 3 questions there. If you're able to sort of summarize them and pop them in the chat for people's records. But what I might do, panel, is ask you each in turn, and feel free to just respond to one that is particularly jumps out to you, or you can give a couple of reflections on a couple of the questions if you want to, but I'll just maybe go in the same order that you spoke. So Michael, do you want to offer some reflections on any or all of those questions first?
Yeah, I think I'll pick up on the last one about whether it's feasible to get students to declare all use of AI. I think it's not. I think we're going to have to talk about behaviours instead. People just aren't going to be aware of whether something is AI or not. It's going to become kind of so normal. The water analogy is brilliant. I use that one again. So yeah, I think we're just going to have to think of different ways of describing this.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Michael. Phil, I'll come to you next. What are your reflections on those questions?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I replied to a couple of those questions in the chat, but just to quickly summarize, if I take the over-reliance kind of question, I do have a concern. I think the concern I have is that students will become over-reliant on the technology. And I think that can, come back to bite them sometimes, maybe later on. So typically assignments should be set up on a module that may be progressive. So students have to use they learn skills, they learn facts and things in the first assignments that they will need to use later on. Now, if students rely on AI technology too much in those initial assignments, then that could come back to bite them a bit later on. So I think that's where kind of clear guidance and communication comes in again, just to remind students of that. And there's various different ways that you can do that. One way that I have with our student guidance is that I've mentioned things like illusion of competence, where a student may think they know something about a topic or know a lot about it. They may think that they do, but in reality, they've used the AI so much to lean on that they actually maybe don't know as much as they think they know. So when it comes to an assignment where it's not possible to use this AI, they suddenly go, oh dear. And they can kind of get themselves into hot water quite quickly. And I think the earlier that we can get that communication across to students, the less likely it is to happen. But I think for me, that's the main one that I kind of not worry about, but I think it's something I think is important to get across early on. I think we can all agree that how useful it is, and think, in the space of time we've had it, just using it for work, if it was now taken away, I think some of us would be like, oh man, I could really use that tool right now to help me do this, or to create that presentation or whatever it is. So yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Stella, your reflections on any or all of those questions?
Can you remind me of the questions? I have very bad attention. Okay, I can see the questions in the chat. So I think outside of the learning experience, the talk that I gave focused a lot on ways that AI could be used to actually enhance the learning experience. I think particularly for students with poor processing or learning difficulties. As someone who has several myself, I've always felt a bit like collateral damage in the pursuit of maintaining traditional teaching styles. And I think that the extent to which having a tool that helps you process information could help those students achieve what they couldn't otherwise is something that I think it's worth looking into and considering. I think that, and this is something that was raised in my university in the context of developing our digital strategy, seeing how quickly this technology is developing and seeing that the current tools we have aren't very well placed to actually identify the use of this as well, is really kind of jarring. I think especially if you weren't kind of born into a time where technology was as rampant as it is now, the kind of technology natives, where for those of us in my generation, we kind of grew up having to adapt to technology changing at a really rapid pace, not as quick as this, but still incredibly quickly. And I think that the concerns around, how do we balance, the benefits we can get, especially for students from neurodiverse backgrounds, with the potential for cheating and the potential for this technology to continue to move at, incredible speeds, needs to be considered in the context of maybe younger generations are better placed to make that determination because they have that experience of adapting to those platforms. So it's about including students and young people more in the conversation, providing governance expertise, providing expertise in terms of assessment, and incorporating their perspectives on how we adapt to the technology. Fantastic, thank you. Irene, your thoughts on the questions?
I can see we're almost out of time, so I'll be very brief.
Thank you.
I'll respond to the first one about damaging the learning process. I think it's really important that that educators set the rules in terms of students having to learn the basics first before they start to use the tools to help them. So if I take my own subject of computer science, you can't write you can't maintain a computer program if you don't know how to program, and therefore you have to learn the basics first before you can then start to use the tools, because we know that these tools are not always accurate and reliable. So I'm going to leave it there and let Bronwyn come in.
Thank you. Yes, Bron, final word.
I've got 2 seconds. So mine is, I'm not changing any assessments in response to AI. I'm just changing expectations about what is now possible with partnering with these tools.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, well, we are out of time, brings us to the end of the webinar. I want to say a quick apology to those who wanted to log on at the start and couldn't. The QAA team hopped on the phone to Zoom to allow you to join, which is why the numbers flicked up midway through that webinar. We will be making this recording available so that you can catch up on what you missed. Big thank you to our brilliant speakers on providing their perspectives, who have, shed a light on lots of the issues that I know that we're all grappling with. Remember, there are 2 more webinars over the next few weeks. One is next Friday, the next is after Easter. One is about how do we use it as a force for good, so the natural next step in the conversation. The one after Easter is about what assessment should look like. The links for those are on our website, but also will be put in the chat. If you're a QAA member, your institution has access to lots of resources on the membership resources site that help with things like how you design assessment, authentic assessment, promoting academic integrity. If you're not sure whether you're a member, there's a list of those on our website. And if your institution isn't a member and you would like to be, then please do reach out to us. The best email for that is membership@qaa.ac.uk, and we can have a conversation about what membership might be able to do for your organisation. So that is all from us. We are 1 minute over. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. We hope to see lots of you back for the next 2 webinars. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.